a long time, we've talked about addiction in, well, a pretty harsh way, haven't we? Like it's just a moral failing.
Absolutely. And our deep dive today is really looking at it differently, using Michael Celso's book, The Void in Addiction.
Right. And his whole idea, his central thesis is that addiction isn't the core issue.
Exactly. It's more of a response, a really complex one, to this deep internal emptiness, a void, as he puts it.
A void. Okay. And this emptiness, where does that come from?
Celso argues it often starts with things like trauma, maybe emotional needs that just weren't met, sometimes societal pressures too. It's a symptom, not the disease itself.
That reframes things quite a bit.
It does. And what I find really powerful about the book is how holistic it is.
How so?
Well, it doesn't just look at, say, opioids or alcohol. It actually connects those substance use disorders with behavioral addictions.
You mean like gambling or gaming or compulsive sexual behaviors?
Precisely. He digs into the shared roots, the neurobiology, the psychology, showing it's often the same underlying search for relief.
Yeah. Okay, so he's bridging that gap. And what specific factors does he say really create this void, this emptiness?
He points to a few key things. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, are a big one.
ACEs.
Yeah.
Those are things like childhood abuse, neglect, serious dysfunction in the home.
Yeah, exactly. Traumatic events before 18. And those experiences, he links them directly to developing insecure attachment styles later in life.
Ah, okay. So it's not just about what happened then, but how it shapes your connections now.
Right. But it's not purely environmental either, which is important.
You mean there's biology involved too?
Definitely. Celso talks about genetic predispositions. Some people might just be more vulnerable. And then there are co-occurring mental health conditions.
Like anxiety and depression.
Especially those, yes. They can really fuel that desperate feeling, that need to fill the void quickly.
And this constant seeking, this trying to fill the void, it must have consequences beyond the individual, right?
Oh, absolutely. He calls it the cycle of the trap. And a big part of that trap is the ripple effect on families, on loved ones. It leads to really damaging dynamics. Things like codependency and a concept called enmeshment.
Wait, let's pause on enmeshment. That sounds kind of clinical. What does that actually mean in a family context?
Good question. So enmeshment is basically when boundaries within the family become super blurred, almost non-existent.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Like a child might feel responsible for managing their parents' emotions, especially if the parent is struggling with addiction. Their own needs get lost.
Wow. So identities get tangled up in the addiction itself.
Exactly. And that makes it incredibly hard for partners or children to find their own healing, their own separation. It causes huge emotional distress.
Okay, so if the void is the root problem and it has these wide-ranging effects, how does Celso suggest we actually start to heal, to fill that void constructively?
Well, the foundation for recovery he lays out is really important. It starts with navigating detox safely, of course.
But it goes beyond just stopping the substance or behavior.
Much beyond. It leans heavily on evidence-based therapies, specific tools.
Like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yes, CBT is key for tackling those distorted thoughts that keep the cycle going. And also DBT, dialectical behavior therapy.
And DBT helps more with managing intense emotions, right? So you don't feel that overwhelming need for external relief.
You got it. It's about building those internal regulation skills. And support networks, of course, are vital too.
This connects to something else you mentioned. The book covers the neuroscience of hope. That sounds intriguing.
It really is. It hinges on neuroplasticity.
The idea that the brain can physically change, adapt, rewire itself.
Exactly. The addicted brain isn't, permanently broken. It's been sort of hijacked, but it can be rewired.
Yeah.
New pathways can be built.
So it's not just about willpower. It's about actively changing the brain's structure and function.
Precisely. It takes strategic action. Celso offers frameworks for finding purpose, again, maybe through small daily steps, rediscovering passions.
Like microdosing purpose, you said.
Something like that. It's about retraining the brain's reward system to value healthy sources of meaning, moving away from compulsion.
From compulsion to actual purpose.
That's the goal. Developing healthy coping mechanisms, finding things that genuinely bring meaning back into life.
So wrapping this up, what's the main thing you, listening, should take away from this?
I think the core message is to see addiction not as that simplistic moral failing, but as this really complex symptom.
A symptom with biological roots, psychological ones,
Why?
Even existential ones?
Yes. It reflects that deep, maybe universal human search for feeling whole, for connection. The void in addiction is really a testament to human resilience.
That leads to a final thought, maybe something for you to consider.
If we accept that our brains can change, that neuroplasticity is real, how does knowing you have the power to actively rewire and retrain your brain potentially shift your approach?
Whether that's in your own life or maybe how you support others, how does that knowledge empower your journey towards integration and finding deeper purpose?
Something to think about.
Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into Michael Celso's book, The Void in Addiction.
Right.
And our goal, really, is to get a quick handle on his main idea, this thing he calls the void, and also just how much addiction has, well, changed, expanded. It's not just what we used to think.
Absolutely. That's a key part of it. The old view, just alcohol or opioids.
No, that's too narrow now, right?
Way too narrow.
Yeah.
Celso's point is we're seeing these pervasive behavioral compulsions everywhere.
Things that can mess up your life just as much.
Exactly. So we kind of have to acknowledge that wider picture from the start.
Okay, so let's get to the core then. This void. What is it exactly?
Well, the fundamental idea is pretty straightforward, actually. Addiction, he argues, is basically it's a maladaptive solution.
A maladaptive solution to what?
To this deep internal feeling of absence. Emptiness. That's the void.
Okay. Emptiness.
Yeah.
But where does that come from? Is it just like feeling down?
It's usually deeper.
Yeah.
Celso points to things like unmet emotional needs from way back or trauma.
Right. Trauma keeps coming up in these discussions.
It does. Or even just a fundamental struggle with managing emotions, with self-regulation. It's like a core deficit.
A hole the brain's desperately trying to fill.
Precisely. And that search for meaning or connection or just relief, solace, it gets funneled.
Funneled into these destructive habits.
Yeah, into these patterns that offer quick but ultimately damaging relief. The drive for solace is kind of the engine behind it.
Which brings us to the modern stuff, because it's not just chemicals anymore, is it?
Not at all. That's the whole point about the expanded landscape.
So give us some examples. What kind of behaviors are we talking about?
Well, think about the tiny hit of validation from a social media, like fleeting, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Or getting completely lost in a video game, just total escape.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or the rush from a gambling win, even a small one. Or that instant buzz from clicking buy now online.
The impulse buys, yeah.
All of these can temporarily paper over that void. They serve the same basic function as a drug might have.
Okay. But here's a question then. Doesn't that mean almost anything could be an addiction? Like, where's the line? When does it stop being just a habit, maybe a bad habit, and become this?
That's a really important distinction. And Celso is clear on this. The key is that these behaviors, these compulsions, share the same basic mechanisms in the brain as substance addictions.
You mean like neurobiologically?
Exactly. Neurobiologically, psychologically. They hijack the brain's reward system.
The dopamine pathways.
That's the one, dopamine. It creates this cycle. You need more and more for the same effect tolerance. You get intense cravings. You feel awful without a withdrawal.
Whether it's a chemical or clicking a button.
Precisely. It stops being just something you do and becomes something you feel you need to escape this internal pain or discomfort. It's a loss of control.
Right. Okay, so summing this up then. This deep dive really confirms addiction isn't some kind of moral failing.
Absolutely not. It's complex. It's neurobiological. It's driven by this powerful need to fill that internal gap, that void.
Not about willpower.
Definitely not about willpower. And if you connect it to the broader research, especially around trauma, adverse childhood experiences, then addiction often looks more like a symptom of really deep, sometimes unbearable psychic pain.
A survival attempt gone wrong.
A desperate attempt to cope that just took a destructive turn.
So here's something for you, the listener, to maybe think about. If addiction, whether it's substances or behaviors, is really just this frantic attempt to survive unbearable internal pain.
Pain often rooted in that early trauma or unmet needs.
Right. Then how much does it change things if we see the pain itself as the real problem we need to address for recovery? How different does that path look?
It's focused entirely on the void in addiction. We're really trying to get past that, older idea of addiction as just some kind of moral failing.
Right. The sources we looked at, they really push us to see it differently as a really complex response to something missing deep inside, a deficit.
And what struck me is how much the whole picture has changed. It's not just about, say, alcohol or opioids anymore, is it?
Not at all. That's a key point in the sources. We absolutely have to recognize these behavioral compulsions, Things like gambling, excessive internet use,
Right.
they're just as destructive.
That phrase, equally destructive, that really lands. It means, chasing likes on social media, that quick hit.
Or the thrill from a gambling win, yeah.
Exactly. Or getting lost in a video game for hours. Or even just that instant click and buy online shopping.
They all tap into the same things, neurobiologically speaking. Psychologically, too, it's not so different from substance issues.
So the common element isn't really the thing, the drug or the action. It's more about what? Impulse control.
That's a huge part of it, yeah. Impulse control, trouble regulating emotions. These behaviors become a way, often the only way someone feels they can cope, to sort of fill that emptiness inside, and they all end up hijacking the brain's reward system.
Okay, that makes sense for why it might start. But the compulsion, the biological trap?
Yeah.
How does the brain lock that in? It's dopamine, isn't
But
it?
it really is dopamine central. These addictive things, whether it's a substance or a behavior, they flood that reward pathway. Much, much more dopamine than, like, eating a good meal or hanging out with friends.
So the brain gets overwhelmed.
Totally. And it tries to protect itself, tries to get back to homeostasis, balance, so it starts reducing its own dopamine receptors, pulling them back.
Like turning down the volume because the signal's way too loud.
That's a good way to put it. And that's tolerance. The brain becomes less sensitive. So the person needs more of the substance, or they need to do the behavior more often.
They're not even to get high anymore, right?
Yeah.
So just to feel, okay,
Yeah.
normal.
Exactly. Just to feel normal, or maybe just not awful. That's the terrifying shift the sources really emphasize.
The motivation flips. It goes from chasing a good feeling
Right.
to just desperately trying to avoid feeling terrible, avoiding withdrawal, discomfort. It stops feeling like a choice.
Right. It becomes a necessity. So if
Yeah.
we zoom out, this really highlights that the addiction itself, it's almost like a symptom.
It's a coping mechanism, a maladaptive one, obviously, a really damaging bargain the person makes to deal with some kind of underlying pain that feels unbearable, a psychic deficit.
And where does that pain, that void, usually come from? The sources point pretty consistently towards trauma, don't they?
Yeah, trauma is a big one.
Yeah.
Whether it's one major event or ongoing chronic stuff, the addiction offers a way to numb out, to dissociate from horrible memories, or just dampen down feelings like shame or intense fear.
Makes sense, like a chemical or behavioral escape hatch.
It can feel like that.
Mhm.
And beyond trauma, there's often loss, isolation, not feeling like you belong anywhere, or maybe unresolved grief. The compulsion tries to fill that gap. And low self-esteem too, right? The behavior gives a temporary fake boost.
For sure. A fleeting sense of control or confidence, or just a way to escape harsh self-judgment for a little while.
So the big takeaway here seems to be that addiction is incredibly complex.
Yeah.
Biopsychosocial, as they say. It's definitely not about weak willpower.
Absolutely not. It's a response to suffering, deep suffering.
Yeah.
And that means it needs compassion, it needs care that understands the trauma possibly underneath.
But it's not hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
The sources also talk about neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change.
Exactly. That's the really provocative, hopeful part. Addiction does carve these deep, powerful pathways in the brain, like superhighways for the compulsive behavior. But recovery, it's literally about rewiring.
Building new roads.
Building new, healthier pathways. It's a biological process, a psychological one. It takes time, takes effort, but it can restore balance and lead towards, genuine fulfillment, not just chasing a fleeting high.
So recovery isn't just stopping something bad, it's actively building something good in the brain, something for you to think about. If addiction often masks pain or trauma, what healthy pathways, what coping skills can you actively build in your own life right now to maybe shrink any void before it feels overwhelming?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really digging into Michael Celso's work from 2025, The Void in Addiction.
Yeah, it's a really insightful book.
Our mission here is basically to pull out the core argument for you, the idea that addiction isn't, just about substances or bad choices.
Right. It's framed as more of a response, a reaction to this kind of fundamental inner emptiness, this void he talks about.
And that reframing feels crucial, doesn't it? Because the landscape of what we even call addiction now is so much broader.
Totally. Celso makes that point really clearly. It's way beyond just alcohol or opioids. We're seeing these compulsive behaviors everywhere now.
Like what specifically? What are some modern examples he brings up?
Think about things like compulsive online gaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or even obsessive shopping, anomania. Gambling, obviously.
And maybe even the chase for likes on social media, that constant need for validation.
Exactly. He argues they all tap into similar pathways in the brain, the same sort of neurobiological roots as substance addiction.
Okay, so if all these different things can feed the same cycle, what's the common thread? What is this void, according to Celso?
So the core idea is that addiction functions as a maladaptive coping mechanism, essentially a solution, but a really destructive one,
A solution to what, though?
to that underlying deficit, that deep sense of something missing, that gnawing void. It's the brain desperately trying to cope, not consciously choosing self-destruction.
Okay, that makes sense. So where does that feeling, that emptiness, actually come from? What are the roots?
Celso points to a few key psychological origins. One major one is trauma, especially adverse childhood experiences, ACEs.
Right, like abuse or neglect early on.
Yeah. When your basic sense of safety gets shattered as a kid, it can lead people to try and numb really overwhelming feelings: shame, fear, anxiety, self-medication, basically.
And that actually changes you physically, right? Your stress system.
It does. It really impacts the HPA axis, the body's main stress regulator.
Yeah.
You can kind of get stuck in the on position, leaving you constantly feeling under threat.
Wow. Okay, so trauma is one source. What else contributes to this void?
Another big one is relational deficits. Think about attachment styles formed in childhood. If caregiving was inconsistent or maybe rejected.
You don't learn how to feel secure with people or manage your own emotions.
Exactly. That can create this profound sense of loneliness and inability to self-soothe. And so the substance or the behavior kind of steps in.
As a substitute connection.
Sort of, yeah. A really poor, damaging substitute for that human connection or emotional regulation that was missing. And then there's often just a deep existential emptiness, too.
Like low self-worth or feeling lost, no sense of purpose.
Precisely. And the intensity, the focus of the addiction can feel like a powerful, if temporary, antidote to that feeling of meaninglessness. It fills the void for a moment.
It's also worth mentioning quickly, he notes the high rate of co-occurring things like anxiety and depression, right? They fuel each other.
Absolutely. It becomes a vicious cycle, needing integrated treatment that addresses both.
Okay, so the mind is searching for relief, for connection, but then the brain gets involved in a very physical way. This is where Celso really pushes back against the idea that it's just about willpower, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's critical. We have to get past seeing addiction as a moral failing or a lack of willpower.
Because it isn't.
No. The source is very clear. It should be understood as a chronic brain disease. That shift is vital. It changes how we approach it. Less blame, more understanding of the biological changes.
So how does the brain actually get, well, trapped? What's the mechanism?
It's essentially a chemical hijack. The addictive substance or behavior floods the brain's reward pathway with dopamine.
And dopamine feels good, right? That's the pleasure chemical.
It is, but this isn't like the dopamine hit from, say, enjoying a meal or having a good chat. It's way, way more intense, overwhelmingly so.
And the brain can't just handle that constantly.
Nope. It tries to adapt. It starts to downregulate its own dopamine receptors to cope with the flood. That's tolerance.
Meaning you need more of the drug or behavior just to feel normal. Not even high, just baseline.
Exactly. And the really damaging part is that natural rewards, things that used to bring pleasure, they just don't register anymore. They feel flat, uninteresting.
So life loses its color, in a way.
It really does. And on top of that, this whole process messes with the prefrontal cortex. That's your brain's CEO, responsible for judgment, impulse control, rational thinking.
So decision-making goes out the window.
Pretty much. It becomes incredibly hard to resist the impulse. Even when you know the consequences are terrible, the hijack is complete.
And we should also touch on vulnerability. It's not the same for everyone. Genetics play a role.
Definitely. Celso mentions the research showing heritability for addiction is somewhere in the range of 40% to 60%.
Which is significant.
It is. But it's not destiny. The way he puts it is helpful. Genetics might load the gun, but it's environment and experience that pull the trigger.
Okay, so pulling this all together, what's the big takeaway for you, for the listener? How should this change how we view addiction?
I think the main shift is moving towards seeing it as this complex condition with biological, psychological, and social roots. It really demands more compassion,
And better approaches to helping people.
Yeah, education and treatment that's trauma-informed that actually gets at the root cause, that void we talked about, not just managing the symptoms or the behavior on the surface.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe a final thought to leave people with. Celso touches on neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change.
Right. And that offers hope, doesn't it? The journey of recovery seen through this lens isn't just about stopping something. It's about building something new.
Exactly. It's an active process.
Yeah.
It's literally about rewiring those pathways in the brain. You're consciously, effortfully forging a new, healthier trail, moving away from that old, deeply carved, dopamine-driven superhighway of addiction. It takes time, it takes work, to something missing deep inside, a deficit.
And what struck me is how much the whole picture has changed. It's not just about, say, alcohol or opioids anymore, is it?
Not at all. That's a key point in the sources. We absolutely have to recognize these behavioral compulsions, things like gambling, excessive internet use.
Right.
They're just as destructive.
That phrase, equally destructive, that really lands. It means, chasing likes on social media, that quick hit.
Or the thrill from a gambling win, yeah.
Exactly. Or getting lost in a video game for hours. Or even just that instant click and buy online shopping.
They all tap into the same things, neurobiologically speaking. Psychologically, too, it's not so different from substance issues.
So the common element isn't really the thing, the drug or the action. It's more about what? Impulse control.
That's a huge part of it, yeah. Impulse control, trouble regulating emotions. These behaviors become a way, often the only way someone feels they can cope, to sort of fill that emptiness inside, and they all end up hijacking the brain's reward system.
Okay, that makes sense for why it might start. But the compulsion, the biological trap?
Yeah.
How does the brain lock that in? It's dopamine, isn't
But
it?
it really is dopamine central. These addictive things, whether it's a substance or a behavior, they flood that reward pathway. Much, much more dopamine than, like, eating a good meal or hanging out with friends.
So the brain gets overwhelmed.
Totally. And it tries to protect itself, tries to get back to homeostasis, balance, so it starts reducing its own dopamine receptors, pulling them back.
Like turning down the volume because the signal's way too loud.
That's a good way to put it. And that's tolerance. The brain becomes less sensitive. So the person needs more of the substance, or they need to do the behavior more often.
They're not even to get high anymore, right? So just to feel, okay, normal.
Exactly. Just to feel normal, or maybe just not awful. That's the terrifying shift the sources really emphasize.
The motivation flips. It goes from chasing a good feeling to just desperately trying to avoid feeling terrible, avoiding withdrawal, discomfort. It stops feeling like a choice.
Right. It becomes a necessity. So if we zoom out, this really highlights that the addiction itself, it's almost like a symptom.
It's a coping mechanism, a maladaptive one, obviously, a really damaging bargain the person makes to deal with some kind of underlying pain that feels unbearable, a psychic deficit.
And where does that pain, that void, usually come from? The sources point pretty consistently towards trauma, don't they?
Yeah, trauma is a big one. Whether it's one major event or ongoing chronic stuff, the addiction offers a way to numb out, to dissociate from horrible memories, or just dampen down feelings like shame or intense fear.
Makes sense, like a chemical or behavioral escape hatch.
It can feel like that. And beyond trauma, there's often loss, isolation, not feeling like you belong anywhere, or maybe unresolved grief. The compulsion tries to fill that gap. And low self-esteem too, right?
Yeah.
The behavior gives a temporary fake boost.
For sure. A fleeting sense of control or confidence, or just a way to escape harsh self-judgment for a little while.
So the big takeaway here seems to be that addiction is incredibly complex, biopsychosocial, as they say. It's definitely not about weak willpower.
Absolutely not. It's a response to suffering, deep suffering. And that means it needs compassion, it needs care that understands the trauma possibly underneath.
But it's not hopeless. The sources also mention neuroplasticity.
Yes. And that's the really hopeful, kind of provocative part. Addiction creates these really strong, unhealthy pathways in the brain, like superhighways for the compulsive behavior.
But the brain can change.
Exactly. Recovery is literally about rewiring. It's a biological and psychological process of building new pathways, healthier ones.
So it's not just about stopping. It's about building something new that leads to, like, actual fulfillment, real balance.
It's the goal, forging those new connections.
Okay, so maybe something for you listening to think about. If addiction is often a way to cope with pain or trauma, what healthy pathways, what positive coping skills could you maybe strengthen in your own life now to build resilience before any void feels like it's getting too big? Welcome back. Today we're tackling a really important topic, addiction. And specifically, moving past that old idea of it being some kind of moral failing.
Right. That stigma is so damaging. Our source today, Michael Celso's The Void and Addiction, offers a much more compassionate and, frankly, accurate view.
Exactly. The book really reframes addiction. It argues it's not about weakness, but a complex response to something missing inside.
Yeah, Celso calls it the void, a deep internal emptiness. Addiction, in this view, is basically an attempt, often unconscious, to fill that void.
And where does this void come from? Celso points to things like, well, trauma, unmet emotional needs, even societal pressures.
Mm-hmm. It's often rooted in really difficult experiences.
And what I find really compelling is how this book connects different types of addiction.
Yeah.
It's not just siloed,
Oh, absolutely. That's key. It bridges the gap between substance use disorders, opioids, alcohol, stimulants, that sort of thing, and behavioral addictions.
Things like gambling or internet addiction, even compulsive sexual behavior.
Exactly. Celso argues that underneath the neurobiology, the psychology, it shares common roots. It's all trying to soothe that same fundamental emptiness.
So let's dig into that a bit.
Yeah.
What specific factors does Celso identify as creating this emptiness?
Well, a big one is adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. We're talking about things like abuse, neglect, maybe serious dysfunction in the household growing up.
Right. Things that really shape a person early on.
Definitely. And that often leads to insecure attachment styles. Plus, you can't discount genetics. Some people do have predispositions.
And mental health conditions play a role too, I assume, like anxiety or depression.
Oh, hugely. Co-occurring anxiety and depression are major factors. They intensify that feeling of emptiness and the urgency to find some kind of escape,
Makes sense. It creates this desperate search for relief.
Which leads to what Celso calls the cycle of the trap. And it doesn't just affect the individual. The book really highlights the ripple effect.
On family and loved ones.
Yeah, precisely. Family dynamics can get really tangled. You see patterns of codependency, enmeshment, where boundaries just dissolve. It causes a lot of pain for everyone involved.
Okay, so if the void often starts with trauma and these deep-seated issues, how does someone begin to heal? What's the path forward, according to Celso?
Well, the book lays out a foundation for healing. Obviously, navigating detox safely is often the first step for substance issues, but beyond that, it emphasizes specific therapeutic tools.
Like CBT and DBT.
Exactly. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, helps restructure those distorted thought patterns that drive the compulsion. And dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, is crucial for teaching emotional regulation skills.
So you learn to manage intense emotions without needing that external fix.
Pretty much. And of course, strong support networks are vital. You can't really do it alone.
This brings us to something really fascinating in the book, the neuroscience of hope. That sounds, well, hopeful.
It really is. It's grounded in neuroplasticity. The amazing fact that our brains can change, they can physically rewire themselves. The addicted brain isn't, permanently broken.
Wow. So recovery isn't just about willpower. It's about actually changing the brain's pathways.
That's the core idea. It's about rebuilding, rebalancing the brain's reward system, which addiction kind of hijacks. You're essentially retraining your brain.
How does Celso suggest doing that? Is there practical advice?
Yeah, there's actionable guidance. A lot of it focuses on developing healthy coping mechanisms, obviously, but also rediscovering purpose, finding things that bring genuine meaning to your life.
Moving from compulsion towards something fulfilling.
Right. Building new habits, new neural pathways, essentially filling that void with positive connections and meaning, not destructive behaviors.
So the main takeaway for you listening is that addiction is incredibly complex. It's biological, psychological, even existential, you could say. It's often a symptom of a deeper human search.
A search for meaning, for connection, for relief from pain. Understanding that changes everything.
It really does. It shifts the focus from blame to understanding and potential solutions.
Which leads to a final thought. If we accept that the brain can change, that neuroplasticity is real, how might knowing that empower you? Not just regarding addiction, but any challenge you face. How does that knowledge shift your perspective on growth, integration, and finding deeper connection in your own life?
Something to definitely think about. We'll leave you with that until our next deep dive.